guest is Congressman Peter Newton. Congressman, what do you think about the controversial procedure of using embryonic stem cells in research?
I have said many times that we really need to study the subject more and not rush into a decision.
But many people say that a tiny embryo, even one consisting of just a few undifferentiated cells, should be given full human dignity and worth.
Well, absolutely. It is outrageous what is being done. We need to stop this stem cell madness now.
Well, however, some studies show that up to half of all people could benefit from stem cell research.
Is that the half that votes? Because if so, I say let's stop this foolishness and fully fund this research right now.
I think pudding tastes good.
You know, I have always supported pudding, even when it was politically unpopular to do so.
I give up.
Is it okay to take a woman's egg and use it to grow stem cells? Is that okay?
No, not to me.
I don't think so. I think everything should be able to live.
At that stage of its development, it doesn't really have, I mean, it's just kind of like any other cell. I mean, it has the potential to grow into a human, but it's not necessarily human.
I would say yes. It certainly is okay, because after all, I mean, if she doesn't give up the egg, and if it's not fertilized, she's going to expel it anyhow.
Look at a woman, how many eggs she passes a year. You know, it's an egg. You know, you got a lot of them. I'm sure you could start one.
Here in the United States, the debate about embryonic stem cell research rages on. It is a debate about life. On one side, shouldn't we use this technology that could improve the lives of millions of people who are already here? People have been struck with disease or injury. On the other side, the question is, when does life begin? Some believe life begins the moment the first cell divides. So if the Petri dish holds living cells, is it morally acceptable to redirect those cells and transform them into something they wouldn't otherwise become? Then there are concerns about the industrialization of life. Should human embryos be declared inventions that you could patent? That's what we have to figure out. But how do we pursue a thoughtful discussion on stem cell research? Can we find a way to make our trains meet? Bioethicist! Bioethicist! Bioethicist!
We're all ethics experts because we all have to make decisions about what's right and wrong. And it's not fair to ask me or any one person, what's the right place to draw the line? It's a question that we all have to answer collectively, socially, because it's an issue of social policy. We have to decide at what point do we think it's acceptable to use human embryos and potentially past human embryos. And we have to answer, is an embryo, a human embryo, in terms of its moral status, more like the cells you can scrape out of your cheek or more like the person who's sitting before you today, you or I? And I think it's in between. And the question is, I think not whether there's some moral status of human embryos, because I think most people think there is some moral status, but it's not full human being personhood status, and it's not mere tissue. It's in between those two. And the question is, what's the moral benefit we can get from doing it? It's really a balancing. There's a concrete reason that it's worth doing research on human embryos that causes their destruction. There's real cost to doing this research, but the benefit is great enough to outweigh those costs.
What do you think would be the tipping point for therapeutic cloning moral rethinking?
The first kind of therapeutic benefit will be not for building new hearts. That's too complicated. It will be for taking cells and turning them on in ways that will treat disease like diabetes. I think will be the likely first case. How many tens of millions of people in the U.S. who have diabetes of some form or another, from kids through elder adults? It would have a huge impact on people's lives and health. And so then you say, wow, there's a real benefit to a lot of people, not just a few people, a lot of people. How can we hold them hostage, hold their welfare, hold their health hostage, because we think that these tiny cluster of cells have somehow more moral status than they do? That's the argument.
If we're going to pass laws to regulate cloning, right now, if I understand it, it's illegal, any kind of cloning.
No, in the U.S. there's actually no law against cloning. That's what's sort of amazing about the current stalemate in Congress. The House of Representatives has passed 2 cloning bans in the last 2 sessions, but the Senate has not acted either time, and so we have no law. And so it's actually perfectly permissible to do cloning in the U.S. now.
So what's your strong feeling? What's your view? And if I understand this, we're talking about where is this line being drawn?
I think we ought to allow human embryos, certainly that are left over for reproductive purposes, that are not going to be used for reproduction anymore, that will be discarded anyway, to be used in stem cell research with federal money. So that would be an expansion of what the current policy allows.
We've come to a threshold in human history. Stem cells could improve or save millions of lives. So I'm in favor of therapeutic cloning. Growing embryos just for their cells is unnatural, but so is my appendectomy and polio vaccines. Now this is different because we're talking about embryos. But we each have to decide, is a microscopic ball of undifferentiated cells, whether fertilized or clones, a person? See, there are people and institutes full of people called bioethicists, and they study the ethics of life. But when it comes time to vote, what's the difference between them and you and me? Nothing. That's why you got to think about cloning. You got to think about stem cell research so that we can all make good decisions as citizens and for our society. Thank you.
We've covered a lot of ground, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. Check out eyesofnye.org for more cool science.